Welcome to this brief overview of Crimewave California, which recently launched on Kickstarter. I'm Gemma, one of the co-creators of the game. Crimewave California takes you back to 1970s California, also known as the golden age of serial killers. In Crimewave California, you'll either play as all three killers and try and pile up bodies across the board in an effort to make the public panic marker reach boiling point. Alternatively, you might play as one of the investigators who is trying to lock up the killers and punish them for their murders before public panic reaches boiling point. Investigators can choose from 8 roll cards. In this demo, we'll just choose 2 for a 3-player game. Roll cards have the following info: the colour of the character's meeple, starting position of the meeple, the character's special abilities, and the character's drawbacks. Set up the board by placing the investigator markers on their listed locations. So for this example, we've got the forensic expert starting in LA, and we've got the detective starting all the way up in San Francisco. Next, place the killer markers on their respective portraits. The next step is to take the spook markers and place them at the bottom of each killer's spook meter. Next, we'll take the victim counter and put it on the victim counter meter. The final step is to put the public panic marker on the first position of the public panic meter. I should point out that this is just a prototype that we made at our local printing place. Obviously, the Kickstarter editions will be professionally made. We're partnering with Panda Game Manufacturing, who's known for some really big games, including Pandemic. Using the custom murder method dice, set each killer's murder method. Shuffle the investigator cards and deal out 7 to each investigator. Then shuffle the crime cards and deal out 6 cards, plus 1 for each investigator. Next, the player working as all 3 killers needs to secretly select the killer's residences. They can store this information on a piece of paper hidden from the other players. Finally, the player working as the killers must start the game by setting up 2 crime scenes per killer. In total, there'll be 6 crime scenes on the board. Crime scenes must take place a maximum of 4 spaces away from a killer's residence. This is called their comfort zone. For example, because the red killer is currently residing at location 7, they cannot place a crime scene at location 37 because it's 5 spaces away from their place of residence. In this example, let's set up a crime scene on location 30. Crime scenes consist of 3 tiles, the first of which is a victim tile. Victim tiles have white body outlines on one side and a coloured body outline on the other. The colour represents the responsible killer and is hidden down, face down, away from the investigators. Secondly, the murder method tile depicts the murder method the responsible killer used. In our case, because the responsible killer is the Red Terror, who is a strangler, a strangle tile will be left at the crime scene. Evidence tiles have inverted sides. The side with the black background represents unverified evidence, while the side with the white side represents verified evidence. Evidence starts out as unverified, so the black side is placed face up. Once you have all 6 crime scenes on the board, it's time to start the game. Crimewave is played in rounds. Each round has 4 phases. The first phase is the pickup phase. In this phase, everyone picks up cards from their respective decks to end up with their proper amount. We can skip this phase in the first round, because no cards have been played yet. If a full moon card is picked up during this phase by the player controlling the killers, it must be played immediately, before discarding it and replacing it in their hand. The next phase is the play cards phase. This is an example of the first round of the card playing phase. The investigator directly left of the player controlling the killers plays a card, and the effects of that card immediately take place. After that, the next investigator plays a card, and so on, until it comes back around to the player controlling the killers, who plays a card. Investigator cards produce effects that help the investigators capture the killers. This includes adding evidence to crime scenes, revealing the killer behind crime scenes, and various trial cards, which we'll cover later. Conversely, crime cards help the player controlling the killers get away with murder. Because this player is typically outnumbered by investigators, crime cards have a significantly larger effect than prosecution cards. After that is the commit murder phase. In the commit murder phase, the player controlling the killers must leave a new crime scene on the board. The trick is that it's up to them which killer is responsible and where they leave that crime scene, as long as it's in their comfort zone. And they don't need to share that information with anyone. For example, they could decide that the red killer is responsible for this murder. Then the next round, they could decide that the blue killer is responsible. Alternatively, they could decide that the blue killer is responsible twice in a row. When a new crime scene is placed on the board, increase the victim counter. If the victim counter makes its way back to the starting position, increase the public panic marker. Finally, we enter the solve phase. In this phase, the investigators will move around the board and attempt to roll for evidence. Unless otherwise specified, each investigator gets a total of 5 actions to use. Actions can be used for movement, rolling for evidence, and calling in a raid. One movement counts as a meeple moving directly to an adjacent tile. Investigators can travel to unsolved crime scenes, where they will then be able to roll for unverified evidence. Different types of evidence require different dice rolling values, and they also provide different evidence points when used at trial. Rolling for evidence counts as one action. Once an investigator rolls the correct number, that evidence is now verified. If there's at least 3 points of verified evidence, they can turn over the victim marker to reveal the killer. The verified evidence can then be placed directly on that killer's case file. As more and more bodies pile up on the board, the residents of California are starting to get a little panicked. As such, they're going to put in place neighbourhood watch programs to protect themselves. This is a neighbourhood watch tile. It's placed down on a location when that location contains 2 or more adjacent crime scenes. Killers aren't able to pass through locations that have a neighbourhood watch on them. For example, the Green Slayer resides at location 18. Location 25 is inside their comfort zone as it's only 4 spaces away from them. However, because there's a neighbourhood watch at location 21, they're not able to pass through it and thus cannot reach location 25. If enough neighbourhood watches pile up on the board, the killers will find it very difficult to move around. As part of their action or as the result of the panic marker increasing, investigators have the ability to call in a raid on a killer. An investigator calls in a raid by pointing at a location and declaring the killer they're raiding. For example, I call in a raid at location 18 and I think the Blue Butcher is residing there. If the Blue Butcher is indeed at that location, then they're immediately arrested and taken to trial. Otherwise, their spook marker will increase. The spook meter represents a killer's mental state. When a raid is unsuccessfully conducted on a killer, it will spook them, causing their spook marker to rise 1 position. Each time it rises, the killer will take more extreme measures to avoid being captured. For example, when the spook marker rises to the 1st position, the killer will increase their comfort zone by 1 space. When it reaches the 2nd position, they'll be able to change their murder method. And finally, if it rises to the 3rd position, they can move to an entirely new residence. Verified evidence will still be able to be used against them, but investigators will have to start from scratch to find their new hideout. When a killer is arrested, they're immediately taken to trial. The player controlling the killers then goes into a courtroom face-off against the investigator who called in the raid. To begin, both players will secretly place down trial cards from their hands into a single pile. Players can choose to play as many trial cards as they have in their possession, but once they've been placed down, no new cards can be added. When both players are finished, they'll turn over their respective cards. Investigators play prosecution cards, which contribute to the amount of verified evidence in a killer's case file. Conversely, the player controlling the killers plays defense cards, which lowers the amount of evidence points. For example, the Blue Butcher has 7 points of verified evidence in his case file. Added to this, 2 prosecution cards are played worth 5 points, bringing the total to 12 points of evidence. However, the player controlling the killers plays 1 defense card worth 4 points, which brings it back down to 8 points of evidence. After a trial, a killer requires at least 10 points of evidence in order to be convicted, so the Blue Butcher wins the trial. He is immediately set free, and all verified evidence against him is thrown out. However, if there had been enough evidence against him, he would be immediately sent to prison. There's a lot more fun stuff to discover in Crimewave, like random killings and prison breaks and a few other things. But we couldn't cover it all in this short video. So instead, have a look through the rulebook or play the game on Tabletop Simulator with some friends. And then we really hope you'll grab a copy of your own. Thanks so much for your support.